Good morning and welcome. In today's session, we consider a question that many carry in their hearts but do not raise it. Perhaps some of them are skeptical if they will get an answer at all. But let us look at the question nonetheless. The question is based on the 28th verse of the first chapter of the book of Genesis. There, we read that God instructed Adam and Eve to multiply and to fill the face of the earth and subdue it. So the question that's often asked is, why is it that God wanted Adam and Eve to multiply? And this question assumes significance in the context of anxieties politically created about the growth in population and the idea that the earth can no longer support the extent of people there already is. Well, I don't advocate unregulated population growth. Everything in nature has its size and shape, its limits, and whatever exceeds limits invites trouble for itself as well as creates troubles for others. But let me not go into that. Let's stay focused on this question. What was God's idea in mandating that Adam and Eve multiply and fill the earth and subdue it? Now, the most obvious thing that comes to my mind right at the beginning is that when I look at creation as a whole, what characterizes God's idea of creation is diversity. You read the first chapter of Genesis, where you have an account of God creating everything apparently in 6 days. The chronology question remain, but the main thing I want to emphasize at this point in time is diversity. God thinks creation through diversity. Diversity is at the very root of creation, and diversity is therefore ineradicable. And I emphasize this because politically there is a preference today in India for homogeneity, which breeds intolerance, and that's an unfortunate hallmark of Indian political outlook and the spurious dynamism that's on display at the moment. So, the idea of diversity as against homogeneity. God also envisages gender diversity. If you read the 26th and 27th verses, you'll find that God saying, let's create man in our image. Then it says, male and female he created them. Immediately, the idea of creation in the mind of God is inseparable from diversity, and including contraries, complementaries and contraries. In fact, what seems as contrary in the mind of man is complementary in the mind of God. And that's another interesting thought. I will not elaborate on that today. Now, the second point I want to make, I have to put a few insights on the table so that we can think through them. First, I said diversity is the hallmark of God's creative outlook. The second thing I want to say is that human nature, as envisaged by God, and it's related to the first, resembles a pendulum. Pendulum swings from one extreme to the other, right? So if you look at human nature, you'll find that two contrary pulls work at us all the time, or work within us. To go or not to go, to do this or not to do this. And in particular, to look at the big picture, to go forward or to stay put. So these are contrary pulls all the time. And when you put it on the plane of history, the contrary pull is, should I stagnate or should I progress? So these These two things are essential for us to unpack this question. First, I said that diversity is the hallmark of creation. Second, I said, as far as human nature is concerned, pulling in the opposite direction, which is the psychological dimension of diversity. If diversity weren't important to human existence, our mind would have only moved in one direction. Why this contrary pulls? Now, I want to suggest to everyone, because that's what I've experienced as an author, as someone with some creative fire within me, that new ideas are always born in the heat of this contrary pulse. If our mind is pulled only in one direction, as it happens in organized religion, nothing new will emerge. But if you look at the great spiritual geniuses of the world, they were not this kind of monochrome personalities, single color personalities, whose minds worked only in one direction. They were people whose minds were capacious enough to hold all the various dynamics, the pulls and pressures in contrary directions, if you like, the diversities of the world. They were not hamstrung by the small little ideas and categories, the obsessions, the allergies, the biases, the prejudices that we entertain. They were of a very different order. And this was something, for example, that the Jews found very difficult to tolerate to the person of Jesus Christ, because he could not be labeled. They did not know what to do with him, because he was free enough to embrace the diversities and the distinctions, the complementary contraries of the world. For example, when the Jews drew a wedge between Jews and the Samaritans, Jesus held them together. When the priest drew a wedge between sinners and saints, he held them together. In a society that separated the male and the female, he held them together. So on and so forth. So these are all very interesting things to study, and they're complementary things. So now, from what little sense of history I have, let me say that what God introduced right at the beginning, namely that human beings should not stay put in the Garden of Eden, but that they should go beyond the limits of it and experience a wider context. In this is contained a very, very important principle for human beings, and that is the beauty of life, the beauty of humanity, the beauty of culture, the beauty of civilization is that there is always the possibility for the emergence of the new, the given and the new. Now, in this case, the given is Adam and Eve, but that given is always the stepping stone to the new, that which remains to come into being. So the given is the means for the attainment of the not yet given. Now consider at this point, the parable of the talents. The servants are given talents, and that's the given. With that, they are supposed to go and encounter the not given, so that the not given is also brought into the realm of reality. And this is the spiritual pattern. And this spiritual pattern is akin to the pattern of man's forward progress in history. So at this level, there is no contradiction between spirituality and history. So all these contradictions are created by petty minds who cannot understand the larger patterns of God. So now, first I said diversity. The second point I said is that human beings, as the psychological dimension of it, human nature experience contrary pulls. The third thing I'm saying is that these contrary pulls are basic to the emergence of the new. If the pull is only in one direction, the new will never emerge. So, the emergence of the new always requires the mixture of a variety of things. Different things have to be mixed together for the emergence of the new. You ask a lady working in the kitchen, how does she produce an item, a food, a dish? By putting various ingredients into it and then cooking together. And as these ingredients are cooked together, their juices emerge and they enter into all kinds of mysterious actions and reactions, and something new comes into being. That is the fundamental law of life and nature. Now, I'll deal with what I'm going to say on another occasion, because that's a question that many people have asked me about the Tower of Babel. Now there again you see the same thing. Human beings want to stay together, they also want to separate. So they try to create this big tower to symbolize their unity, but they end up by being scattered on the face of the earth. Now, these are beautiful patterns, these are very profound patterns, but unfortunately these patterns have no place in Christian preaching. That's the reason why I thought I would highlight some of these things which are fundamental to understanding reality. And I have always believed that spirituality is a creative engagement with reality. So the two important symbols in the Bible, one is the Tower of Babel in the Old Testament, the second is from the New Testament, the Pentecost. In the story of Babel, things fall apart. In the Pentecost, they come together. That's beautiful. But when they come together, something new is created. And that's celebrated through speaking in tongues. It's the emergence of something new. Unfortunately, people who don't understand this degrade the idea of speaking tongues into some kind of cultic, orgiastic, vulgar, hideous exercise, which I find it even difficult to mention. So, all these things point to something extremely profound and very precious. There is a great need for the various aspects of creation to enter into combinations. Otherwise, creation will die out. First, creation will come to a grinding halt, and then it will die out. Now, let me now look at it from a racial point of view. The idea of race is that people of the same origin stay together. They form a distinct people group. Now, in the Western context, because of slave trade, etc., the whites and the blacks combined, and the outcome is mulattoes. mulattoes, mulattoes. Now, there is a debate whether the mulattoes are an improvement on the whites and the blacks. It's difficult to settle that question because even today there is a huge racial war between the blacks and the whites in all parts of Europe and North America, and therefore very difficult to say if this coming together has paved the way for the emergence of better, higher civilization. If we create conditions conducive for a free, uninhibited interaction, God alone knows if it will not. Now, take the Indian context here. The reason why the genius of India has never been unleashed is the caste system. What's the problem with the caste system? Caste system prevents a free admixture, free flow, a free interaction, a cross-pollination of the various possibilities contained in different people groups. So India is a frozen society, or to use orthopedic language, India is a society in a caste, C-A-S-T. Caste is caste, C-A-S-T-E is C-A-S-T. The Indian society is frozen in the plaster of Paris of caste. And therefore, the Indian genius has never been allowed to blossom. And this is the reason why the genius of India has expressed itself more in imitation than in original creation. Indians are top class in the world for imitating anything. You give them anything, they will produce the exact replica upon the instant, right? At the same time, we are not very good originators, inventors, creators, etc. And that is reflected in the field of industry. Our pride is in saying make in India, not made in India. The difference is Make in India means that people from outside who do their research, who have the capacity for innovation, etc., are invited here, and they use their expertise, they produce, and we get a share of their profit, etc., by way of tax and etc. But we don't want to develop our originality because we have put ourselves in a caste. That's a huge subject, sociological, anthropological, demographic, psychological, anthropological in its ramifications, but again, on another day. So, in this context, we must look at the preference all religious communities have for homogeneity. So far, I have been saying as clearly as I possibly can the fact that diversity, which is the opposite of homogeneity, is the hallmark, is the foundation on which God established creation itself. Nature stands on diversity, society stands on diversity, culture stands on diversity, everything that has life in it stands on diversity. But religion insists on homogeneity. Everybody must do the same thing, must think the same way, must do the same thing, live in the same manner, if possible, eat the same kind of stuff, and in some religions also dress yourself exactly in the same way, so on and so forth. This cultification or idolization of homogeneity is diametrically opposite to the law of life, the law of nature, and indeed the law of history. And yet that is considered to be a great achievement. And unfortunately, as my viewers will now recognize, that this infection has spread from religion into politics, the politics of the Sangh Parivar, which aims at the creation of Hindu Rashtra in place of the socialist, secular, democratic republic that India is an ideology that idolizes homogeneity, and any ideology that idolizes homogeneity, as is abundantly proved in the case of Hitler's political party, will be a political outfit of extreme and malignant intolerance. It can only spew destruction, violence, and cruelty, and all of that India is going to witness in the short-term future. So, now, while homogeneity becomes a political and pseudo-religious preference, it's very clear that diversity is the imperative of progress. Now, for example, the main reason why the United States became the foremost economy in the world and then foremost superpower in the world is that it welcomed diversity. The United States of America is appropriately described as the salad bowl of diversity. Diversity of every kind, racial, ethnic, religious, linguistic, cultural, so on and so forth. America attracted into its lap the pride of various societies. And in India, we used to talk about brain drain. The best from India migrated to other countries, particularly to the United States. Why? Because we don't have the culture that promotes this diversity, that brings out the best from people. I know many people from my village in Kerala who migrated to the United States, people who at the time of migration, seemed to have no promise whatsoever. They flourished in the United States. And in the course of my many travels there, I had the occasion to visit and enjoy the hospitality of many of them. And I'm glad to say that there is a huge difference between these societies, and it's high time that we heeded this. Now, therefore, now that I've made a reference to it, let me say this. I've noticed that the second generation of our Kerala diaspora presence, that is Keralites who have gone and settled in other countries, whether it is United States, Europe, whatever, Malaysia, I find that the second generation is a leap over the first. Tremendous changes happen in such a small period of span of time. Now, if these people had stayed on in Kerala, they would have continued their shriveled existence. So there is something to be said in favor of this. And I'm particularly sensitive to it because at the age of 20, God gave me the opportunity to go to Delhi. I'm someone who does not like cities. Even today, I find it hard to live in a city. But looking back, I realized that being uprooted from Kerala did me a great deal of good. Suddenly, I found myself in a situation completely contrary to what I was used to, and that really made me struggle and brought out the best in me. Therefore, I am not surprised that Indian students who go abroad and study in other universities, they do exceptionally well. All these things are telling us something very important. And my point is that all this is anticipated in that seemingly simple statement that God made, the mandate given to Adam and Eve: go forth, multiply, and fill the face of the earth, and exercise dominion over the earth. So, diversity, therefore, was God's agenda. Now, if Adam and Eve had stayed put in the Garden of Eden, it would have been a terrible calamity for humanity. Now, many Christians would be upset that I say this, because after all we are used to thinking of the fall as the reason for all the calamities of the world. But there is this other side, and in olden days theologians used to recognize this, and this used to be called felix culpa, or happy guilt. Sad that the original sin happened, but glad that its fruits over a long period of time proved to be so gloriously good. So we are caught in this kind of ambivalence, this paradox of the happy guilt or the fortunate fall of Adam and Eve. So, humanity is meant by God to progress. Stagnation is not God's plan for us. Every one of us. Now, individually, everyone has to grow. Collectively, we have to progress. This is very important. Let me say that again. Individually, we have to grow to our full stature. Collectively, we have to progress. These are the two facets of spirituality. Biblical spirituality is historically dynamic because of this twofold emphasis, which is completely lost on organized Christianity. Organized Christianity is all about piety, it is all about despising the world, it's all about fixing your eyes to the world to come, etc., etc. But that's not the spirituality that I find in the scriptures, in the Bible. To me, these are the two important facets of biblical spirituality. One is that individually you must grow and develop, and grow keeping Jesus Christ as your model. Jesus Christ is the most inspiring, most luminous example of the holistic, total development of human personality. This is the ultimate. And that's the yardstick given for us. And Jesus himself says, be perfect even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Perfect. I don't have to say this to you, that perfection is the outcome of growth. You can't be perfect if you don't grow. So clearly, one of the greatest emphases in biblical spirituality is on personal growth. Each one of us is mandated to grow to our full stature, full potential, full capabilities. That is when our life becomes fruitful. That's why Jesus says, if you abide in me and I in you, you will produce much fruit. And fruit denotes a state of total development. A tree that does not develop, that does not grow, cannot produce fruit. So, individual growth and collective progress. This is most important. So, this insight takes us in an embryonic fashion in the commandment or in the instruction given to Adam and Eve, go forth and multiply. If Adam and Eve were not to go forth and multiply, history would have been different. Humankind would have been very disappointing. So I am amazed at the wisdom of God, which was injected into the dynamics of human existence on this earth. And it is already anticipated immediately after the creation of humankind, that this would be the historical dynamism that characterizes humanity. So, it is very essential that we go, and let me conclude on this. When God says to Adam and Eve, go forth and multiply, how does it, or how should it affect us, or what should it mean to us? The meaning is, staying put is ungodly, it is satanic. If so, the idea that every Christian must be imprisoned in a particular denominational enclave is thoroughly ungodly. It is anti-human growth and development. It is against the genius of biblical spirituality. In contrast, what did Jesus do? Jesus said, go. Jesus called his disciples, as you read very clearly in the 14th verse of the 4th chapter of Mark's Gospel. He called his disciples in order that they may live with him and that he may send them out. In contrast to this, the priestly class says to us, don't go anywhere, stay put, stay under my elbow. Don't look this way or that. Don't look at the big picture. Be small in your mind. Be half blind, purblind. Don't see reality. Don't look at your possibilities. Don't think. Don't develop yourself. It's a great danger. Now, I can't imagine a greater disservice than this that any class of people can do to fellow human beings. And my dear friends, this is the reason why I'm very critical of the priestly class. It's not an accident that in history, the priestly class has always played a regressive, retrograde role. They have been the foremost stumbling blocks to human progress. And they have been perpetrators of human slavery and bondage. And they are the ambassadors of human pettiness. I don't say this because of any animosity towards any individual priest. Many priests are my friends and I'm very fond of them. But I'm talking about priests as a class, as a genus. The priestly class is wicked, it is satanic, it is diabolic because it works completely contrary to the plan of God. And the question that has been raised with me in the past as to why did God ask Adam and Eve to go forth and multiply gives me an appropriate context for highlighting this reality. Let me summarize. I talked about diversity as the hallmark of creation. Then I talked about human nature as a playground of contrary pulls, going forward, going backwards, to do or not to do, etc. Then I talked about admixture, diverse elements mixing up as a necessary condition for the emergence of the new, and that's called evolution or progress, the opposite of which is stagnation, which has absolutely no merit. Then I said that socially, the caste system in India, as an example, caste system of India, froze the Indian society, as a result of which the Indian people never realized its genius. Politically, the RSS, the Sangh Parivar in India, wants to make homogeneity, which is the opposite of diversity, as its political philosophy. And I said that it has got horrendous consequences which are going to play out in India. And in contrast to that, I said that if you look at a society like America, it progressed and became preeminent in the world because it welcomed diverse elements from various corners of the world. It became a salad bowl of diversity and variety, which accounts for its intellectual, cultural dynamism, vitality. And it is this that constitutes the beauty of biblical spirituality. Then I said biblical spirituality has two important components. It emphasizes our duty to grow in our person to the uttermost, personal growth. Second, collective progress. We have to progress as a community. Unfortunately, when we become a community, we become regressive, retrograde. We always look backwards. We think it's a sin to look forwards. Now, all this is completely contrary to the plan of God and The class that infects us with this religious malady, this epidemic, is the priestly class, because they know no better. So God's mandate is very clear. Go forth. Go forth. There's a great deal to be achieved. A glorious future awaits you. And my message in particular to the youth is this: do not stay confined to the status quo. Go forth, multiply, grow, grow. Reveal the glory of God's creation. God created you in the image and likeness of Himself. Reveal that glory. That's possible only through personal growth as well as our growth together as a community. Indeed, our growth together as humankind. Thank you very much.